Hello, and welcome to the Writers and Illustrators of the Future podcast. This is John Goodwin, your host. This podcast is dedicated to the aspiring writer or artist and will provide inspiration and tips from top professionals in the field, along with contest winners. And today we are speaking with David D'Amico. Welcome, David.
Welcome. Thank you, John.
Yeah, so we originally met. It seems like it's interesting how when I talk to the past winner, sometimes it feels just really recently and sometimes a while ago. But because we were chatting about 4 or 5 months ago, maybe 6 months ago, when you did that blog post for us for Writers of the Future, it seems like it was just recently that we met. But it was way back in volume 27 that you were a winner.
About 10 years ago.
About 10 years ago, exactly. So anyway, so it's great to be able to talk with you. I guess the main thing that I'm interested in, because when I read your blog post that you did, you've had quite a journey you've gone through. So I'd like to first of all start with your experiences as a starting out writer and to actually everything you had to overcome to actually become a writer, and then we'll talk about the coming out here to Los Angeles for the event, and then what happened after that. So first of all, like how you got started as a writer.
Well, I really enjoy reading science fiction. An uncle of mine got me started way back in the 1970s when I was a kid. And I thought, I can do this because I have a lot of stuff going on in my head, crazy stuff going on in my head. So I started writing a little bit back in high school, 1978, 77. But I didn't really do anything with it. I just played around with it. I put it aside. Work got in the way, life got in the way. Every once in a while, I'd go back and I'd write a story, or I'd think up a story, and I have all these notes. I have notes going back decades, but I never really did anything with it. I played around a lot over the course of decades. Finally, at one point in 2009, I think, my twin brother Dean came up to me and goes, "Hey, I wrote a novel." I said, "What the hell? That's my dream. What are you doing?" I thought it was hilarious that he did that, but it scared me quite a bit. And so I said, well, if you're going to be a writer, I'm going to be a writer too. So I sat down and I wrote some stories. And I wrote one story, The Lemon Thief of Masjid al-Salam, which I submitted to Writers of the Future. It got an honorable mention. I thought that would depress me a little, not making the grade, but the fact that the stories were so good and the writing was so professional in Writers of the Future, that I thought, well, an honorable mention, that's still a really good thing. So I submitted again the next quarter, and I actually won second place for my story, Vector Victoria.
Which is an amazingly great story.
Thank you.
So, so is it part of it was just competition with your brother that egged you on, or?
I think it is. I think we've had this competition going for a while. He's still writing with me. We write together sometimes.
Oh, how cool is that? That's brothers writing together. That's way cool.
That is cool. We actually wrote a story together that got published. It was called One Slow Trigger Day, and it got published Electric Spec a few years back.
Uh-huh.
He's been published once himself, but he's still struggling. He still enters Writers of the Future every quarter.
Oh, that's good.
He's got a lot of honorable mentions, but he hasn't quite made the grade yet.
All right. Well, we've had winners that have gone up to 25 plus honorable mentions before winning, and entries that have gone on for literally decades before they finally won. So it is a matter of persistence.
Well, that's the thing. You could have a really good, saleable story and still only get a Writers of the Future honorable mention because there's so many good stories coming into the anthology.
That's right.
It doesn't mean the story's not good. It just means it wasn't the quality for that quarter.
Yeah, Orson Scott Card commented on that a couple of different times, that get your story to Rise to the Future. That's the primo book to get published in, because that's the one that is the cream of the crop, the best of the best. But
it is.
He said when he had his Intergalactic Medicine show, he said what he was publishing is the Rise of the Future rejects. He was a little bit tongue in cheek, but he was saying what I'm publishing is what Rise of the Future rejected. So it really is, because him and all these other amazingly talented writers who are themselves judges of the contest select what they see as being the best. So it's quite an honor to be selected. And if you didn't win it, just keep on going. As many people get their stories published in other magazines and other online magazines that didn't make the Rise of Future cut, but it's still it's just really great writing. It's just that Rise of Future really is the top level.
It really is. I've actually read just about every volume. I still haven't read 35, and I'm kind of sad about that, but I have plenty of time now, so I'll get to it.
Oh, good. And then 36 also is available now, too.
Looking forward to that one.
Yeah.
Looking forward to that, too.
Yes. So what was the week like when you were out here in Hollywood as a writer? What did you see that was of best benefit for you? Like, what was your biggest takeaway from that week-long workshop and awards event?
The most exciting thing about it was being in a room with a lot of people who knew what I was going through. They were new writers. Some of them hadn't been published before. Some of them were just a couple of times. But we were all in the same boat. We all had the same experiences overall. And it was like a brotherhood almost. It was a fellowship.
Yeah, the fellowship of the book. So are you still in communication with any of your winners?
I've talked to a few, and I follow the careers of a few others. The first place winner for the year that I was in, volume 27, Richard Johnson, he's coming out with a novel soon, and I love reading his stuff. He is so good.
Yeah, he just actually commented the big reveal for volume 36 was done recently. We had to do it as an online event rather than in person. And he commented how it brought back great memories for him watching this big reveal online now. Which anybody can see, the Rise of the Future big reveal events, and it's on YouTube and it's on Facebook.
Yeah, the big reveal is a very touching moment when you see the illustrations and you link it to your story. I feel bad this year because the contest the award ceremony had to be put back.
Yeah.
All these new writers, just, the anticipation, now they have to wait a few more months.
Yeah.
I can imagine.
Yeah. For the event and for the workshop, but we did it as a Zoom event. And so we had all the winners there. And so they were we showed the art one after the other. And then the writer said, that's mine. And then we had the writer and the illustrator chat with each other on the Zoom event. And then we it's not quite as emotional as when it's live there next, seeing everybody, but it was still, we got some good emotion there on that. And it was really fun being able to meet all of them, even if it was only virtually, because that's, like it was with your year, every year, it's just such amazingly talented people that all come together. So I think what you said about that and about, everybody coming together and just, you've got all those creatives. You can't help but have a really good result when you have that many creatives together at the same place, at the same time with all the winners and all the judges. And we had a lot of judges online too, watching the big reveal.
Yeah, and it made a lot of, instantly connected with almost everybody because we were all in the same boat. We all had the same experiences. It was unbelievable. I'll tell you, the back to the big reveal, the illustrations are so excellent. I don't know why you don't publish a book of just the illustrations or maybe calendars or something.
Yeah. Well,
I love going back and looking at the illustrations.
Yeah, no, that's a definite idea on that, to be able to do that. So at the workshop, what about the workshop did you find the most valuable?
Well, I loved reading the articles by L. Ron Hubbard. Some of them were, most of the articles were really old, but they still reflected today's views on writing and plotting and character and stuff like that. It was like they were timeless. They gave me a lot of information, and sharing that with the group was a big thing.
Yeah.
We all got to sit there and discuss things and go over what we learned from stuff like that. And I really enjoyed doing the 24-hour story. where they gave us a prop and we had to write a story about it.
Yeah, you had to go meet a stranger and go to the library and do some research as well.
Yeah, well, meeting the stranger thing, we all had a little bit of a problem with that because writers in general are introverts, I think. We all had a little bit of problem meeting strangers, but it was still interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, we've had some great stories come as a result of people walking on Hollywood Boulevard. We did it in Hollywood with you?
Yeah, it was Hollywood.
Yeah.
I remember Patty Jansen. She was sitting right next to me at the workshop. She wrote 24-hour stories that got published in Analog.
Yeah, a lot of our winners have had their 24-hour stories published in various magazines.
Yeah, mine was published in 2013. My Set in Stone was the title of the story.
Yeah, it's a really an amazing testament to the fact that you don't need to take a long time. It's like a 24-hour story to come up with a great idea. You may probably had to polish it a bit afterwards, but to submit it and that they sell. It's a lot of the winners are just amazed. Almost everybody sells their story.
It was pretty interesting writing the story because it was the feeling was infectious.
Yeah.
Everybody got the bug to write, and we went over a few of the stories, and it was really interesting to see what people took away from their prop and how they devised their story.
Yeah.
In such a short period of time.
Yeah, it just proves that it can be done. Definitely.
Yes, it can.
So now on the yourself, you're not a career writer right now, although you probably would like to be. What do you do? What's your vocation as compared to writing as your avocation right now?
Well, I work with computers for the most part, and this year I'm giving it a try for the full-time writing thing.
Wow.
So
what kind of a
stepping up?
Stepping up. Okay, that's it. I'm doing it.
Yep.
So how's
quarters of the way through my novel?
All right. So what's your writing schedule?
Novel. I'm pretty casual. I get up in the morning and I sit down probably around 9 o'clock and I write for a few hours, take a lunch break, and I sit down and write for a couple more hours.
Good.
I have a minimum word count I have to meet, but I get through it every day.
Good. What do you set as your minimum?
2,000.
And then what's the most you've written in a day?
4 or 5. I'm a slow writer because I go back and go over my work again and again and again. I'm one of those people that can't just push it forward. I have to keep double-checking myself.
Yeah.
It's my process.
It's interesting that one of the things that I observe with the writers of the future, by having such a varied, I guess, cross-section of writers as the judges, you have some that just motor out the stories and they're just like bang. And then some are very slow and methodical. Some will fully outline. Some want to just see what happens as they write, just let it go and see where the story goes. There's something for everybody, and it's how do you do stuff that's the hard sci-fi, the light sci-fi, the YA, fantasy, epic fantasy. So with all these with all the judges, there's something for everybody, and so there's no like this is how you write. And
no two writers do it the same way. My twin brother, he cranks through. He writes 3 times faster than I do. I was like, how can you do that? And he does big outlines and bullet points and stuff like that. I have a lot of trouble with that. I'm basically a short story writer. I can fit an entire story in my head, rearrange it, get the words just right, get the scenes just right, and it all fits in my head. But with the novel, I can't do that. It's too big. I don't have enough processing power in my brain for that. So I have to chop it up at the scenes and take them one at a time.
Well, that's fine though.
But my writing is pretty organic.
That's good. That's good. So, because I think this is important for aspiring writers, because they're going to be going through, and inevitably people who don't have their own way worked out yet, they reach for like, okay, what's the way to do it? What's the way to do it? And I think it's important that people understand the right way is your way. And a writer becomes a writer by writing, not by trying to see what everybody else says. It's like, what do you do? What's your story? And tell your story. And various tools on how to do it are important, but ultimately it's your story and you've got to tell your story the way your story goes.
Yeah, you can't listen to anybody on how to write. You can read I've read a lot of articles. I've read a lot of books on writing and stuff like that. But, you take little pieces of that. Whatever you can do to sit down and put words on paper is how you write.
Right.
It has nothing to do with how other people write or how Stephen King does it or Larry Niven does it. You'll do it differently and you'll do it just fine as long as you do it your way.
Yeah. And you're honest with yourself on what your story is. We have an online writing course for Writers of the Future with Scott Card, Tim Powers, and David Farland. And while they are absolutely opinionated on how you write a story, how they write their stories, I should say, it ultimately comes up with, these are some guidelines to use, and this is how you can accomplish suspense, and this is how you can start a story, and these are the points that have to be there. To accomplish that is entirely up to you. So
yeah, you can't follow anybody else. You can listen to the greats and see how they do it. But ultimately, it comes down to just putting words on paper your way.
Exactly. So after you won the writers and you came out here for the workshop, then what happened? Because I know in what was it, in 2015?
Yes, 2000.
The year that almost wasn't. So what happened
February 6th, 2015. The valve in my aortic valve in my heart tore wide open one night. It just split up the middle, I guess. I collapsed. I was in the hospital for a couple of weeks in a coma. When I got out of the hospital, I went home, and 3 days later, I had a heart attack.
Wow.
Which stunned the crap out of me because I thought I was just recovering from something. And a week after that, I ended up going back into the hospital because of blood clots in both my legs.
Well,
I tell people that's the month. February 2015 was the month that somebody really, really tried to kill me.
Wow.
Whoever had the voodoo doll had it blended at that point.
Only from a writer to come up with a solution like that.
Not paranoid, but somebody was out to get me.
Yeah. So anyway,
the September when I wrote that blog post.
Yeah.
Just after I sent it into you, I went in for cancer surgery.
Wow.
Like the next day, I think.
So, is this all, you're just trying to come up with more grist for the mill? Is that what's happening?
That's right. I'm seeing how much punishment my body can take. It's for reference for later on for fury.
Exactly. Well, there's YouTube videos now. You can go and find out what it's like to have to undergo surgery and survive it or have heart attacks. So just to let you know, there are YouTube videos you can do this instead.
I like the personal approach.
I evidently. As a writer who's undergone a lot of stress, and do you find that writing is relaxing for you, or is it stressful? Or because now you've taken it on as a vocation instead of avocation. How do you work this?
The hardest part is sitting in front of that computer at the beginning of the day. It's just getting your butt in the seat is the hardest part. Once I'm in there, I get in the zone, and the words are coming. It's great, but just sitting down and starting. That's the hardest part every day.
Yeah.
You gotta make yourself. You gotta push yourself to sit in the seat. That's the start of it.
Right.
Now everything else is easy after that.
Oh, that's good. Now, is there anybody else at home with you?
Oh, my wife is working from home for the next few months because of circumstances outside.
Yeah. So with that, I was just curious if there's any distraction or if you have to establish any policy on being able to write so that there's no in-house distractions so that you don't find excuses to not keep your rear in the seat.
No, actually, distractions don't bother me. I can write anywhere. I write in bus stations. I write at cafes. I can write in the middle of traffic. It doesn't bother me. When I'm in my world, I'm in there. Nothing can bother me.
Oh, that's good. And then
yeah, I'm very internal when it comes to that. Some people aren't, but I can get in there and stay in there.
Yeah. Now so you said you entered the contest, what, twice?
Twice, yes.
Right. And some have entered many, many more times. What type of advice do you have for aspiring writers that would, I guess, that would assist them to not give up, to persevere?
Persevere. Well, you got to keep writing. You can't let rejections get you down, because they're not rejecting you personally. They're rejecting that one story, and it's so subjective. It could just because they already had a story like that. Your story could be perfectly fine. It has nothing to do with your story. You have to keep plugging. You have to keep writing more stuff. You have to keep going. You can't let rejection get you down. And if you're planning on a specific market, like Writers of the Future, do your research. I read every volume, and it was not a chore. The stories are fantastic, well worth reading, whether you're writing for it or not. Just do the reading. Read a lot of stories. Read a lot of different stories. Read what you like. Is part of being a writer is being a reader.
Yeah, yeah. So, what type of science fiction or fantasy do you write? What do you consider yourself that you are as a writer?
I write very character-driven stuff, mostly near-future sci-fi.
Okay.
I've done a little bit of everything. I've done some horror. I've done some fantasy. The novel I'm currently working on is space opera, technically, although I'm doing it from a character-driven perspective.
Good. Now, how do you do your research for science fiction, for near future science fiction, with obviously it's technology that is hard to say, okay, this is the way it is, because it isn't yet?
Well, I do a lot of research when I'm writing stories in space, getting my facts right on gravity and the planets and all that stuff. But mostly, if I don't know it, I won't write it.
Okay. So when it is something that's like futuristic, what do you consider you have to know in order to claim that you know it, even though it doesn't exist yet?
Well, a lot of the futuristic inventions that science fiction writers come up with are based on stuff that's available today, or stuff that somebody's already building or thinking about. There's other people thinking about the same things, and there's a lot of standard stuff in science fiction that you don't. As a writer, I wouldn't use somebody else's stuff, but I'd make up something similar.
Yeah.
And a lot of stuff is based in fact, and a lot of stuff is based on character.
Now, do you find that you're having been involved with computers as a career, has that made any difference of assisting you write futuristic science fiction?
I don't think so, no, because I don't get into computer details, because I don't like to go overboard on details sometimes. Because I have a tendency that I could spend 10 pages describing a single futuristic device if I let myself go, but you can't really do that. You just have to give people the flavor of it.
That's smart. Sometimes on Writers of the Future, I can tell who are the doctors, versus, sometimes somebody's profession will read through the story because of the detail they're able to put into some aspect of their story. So I was just curious if you use that or not in your telling your story. So I think that's good, because sometimes people will get overboard in what they know to the point of too much.
Well, in some cases, that's really good if they're very knowledgeable and they can work it in and they're a good enough writer. But I'm still unsure of myself when it comes to stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I try to steer away from going overboard.
Yeah. But enough to know that when you say red is actually the correct color to use in this scenario, because you know enough about that subject to be able to know that's red and not purple, without getting into why it's red because of the spectrum and this and the other thing. Because then you will have the technical geeks that will go and they'll challenge it. They'll pick that one little thing and say, there you go, you didn't get it.
I wrote a story once called Moment of Inertia. When I sold it, they offered to buy it on the condition that I do a couple of rewrites. And one of the rewrites was that I had the space station rotating too fast for what I was trying to do. Somebody actually did the math and told me I was off.
Yeah, they'll do that. You'll find people that will just they make it when someone goes into their, being hard science fiction and want to be able to talk about the science fiction. Hal Clement, one of our judges once, who was himself a fighter, a bomber pilot in World War I, and also studied science and physics, talked about that exact thing. He writing his stories, and he put some there where he didn't do the full work on it, where he put some distances and speeds and stuff. And back then I was using a slipstick, his slide rule. He said, I didn't fully work it out, and I was called on it. And you'll find people that will do that. So even if you're going to just put in this little thing, you got to make sure it's correct, because otherwise somebody will call you on it, and you don't need that negative review.
No, but I really like, I was offended at first, but I really like the fact that somebody's paying attention.
Yeah, and it's good that it was the editor and not fans.
Yeah, especially if it's the editor, not the fans.
Yeah. So in terms of advice to other aspiring writers who are themselves trying to juggle a career, when you were writing before you decided to become full-time, how did you manage both a career and writing?
You just got to find time to put yourself in the seat and sit down and write. I wrote at break in work. I came up with plots on my drive, my commute. When I get home, I put an hour aside, which wasn't really that easy, but I did it anyways.
Yeah.
I found time whenever I could find time, even if it's just, 50 words, 100 words. You put a word here, you put a word there. Eventually you have a story.
That makes sense. That makes very good sense. So what do, I guess people have to look forward to with David D'Amico in the future?
Well, I'm completing work on my first of a series of novels, a space opera. I like to bill it as Cinderella meets the Foundation trilogy. The first book is called Relics of Innocence, and it's based, the whole series is based on a story I wrote called Relics of Empire. It was published in Mythic a couple of years ago. It's big picture, and I'm usually not a big picture guy, but I'm doing it from a character-driven perspective, so it's come out pretty good so far, and I'm hoping that it works its way through.
Yeah.
And of course I continue writing stories. Just last month, I placed in the top 10 for the Jim Beam Memorial Science Fiction Award.
Yeah, I saw that. That's great. Congratulations on that.
I write for that every year, too. But I continue writing stories because I'm basically a short story writer. But I'm trying the novel thing.
Yeah, well, I think it's important that a writer writes and keep on going, and that you're now moving from short fiction into novels is great, and I very look forward to that. Where are you looking to have that as a 2020 release still?
Yes, I think I may be able to finish it in time to get it to a publisher. Hopefully they'll pick it up.
Yeah.
We'll see what happens with that. I like the writing, and tell you the truth, I've sold so many stories. I think I'm starting to get the hang of this. Yeah.
How does somebody find you? Where do they go to find you on social, on your website?
My website is dadamico.com.
So that's D. So spell it out, please. DADAMICO.com. Okay.
I'm on Facebook at author D.A. D'Amico. I have a Twitter handle, but I don't really Twitter that often.
Yeah. Okay. So people can find your short fiction by going to those pages to see where it is?
Yep. I have lists of my sold stories, and I have collections of previously published stories available on Amazon, 3 or 4 collections with my science fiction, my horror, and some of my flash fiction, all stuff that's been sold in different magazines, different venues. And there's a list of everything I've sold and where it is. That's
great. So any other last bit of advice you'd like to, or last thing you'd like to say while we wrap up here?
Yes. Everybody should be trying to write for writers of the future. It's worth it. It's definitely worth it. It was the experience of a lifetime for me. Read the books and write the stories. Even if you don't get published, you don't get picked, you don't win, it's still worth doing.
That's great. Thank you very much, David.
Thank you.
And thank you for listening. Subscribe to the Writers of the Future podcast wherever you get your podcasts. It's available on SoundCloud, iTunes, Google Play, Pocket Casts, Stitcher, Player FM, iHeart, and Spotify. Writers and Illustrators of the Future are contests created by L. Ron Hubbard to provide a means for the aspiring writer and artist to be seen and acknowledged. It is free to enter and open to new and amateur short story writers and artists of science fiction or fantasy. And thank you again very much, David.
Thank you very much.